The story continues with Naoto Hachioji being a pushover and letting an Ebony Jr. order him around. Although he's not much of a useless bum, his mediocre talents got him to the heights of befriending other girls, causing his little Ebony mistress to gatekeep him all for herself. During club activities, Hachioji reads through a shoujo manga and finds himself to be relatable to the main male character of the story. But his favorite cute junior bursts into the room to check what her senpai is up. Immediately, she snatches the book from him and realizes that it's one of the few series she follows. She also remarks that she finds herself relating with the female cast as well. The brat teases her senpai into making him do questionable things, but he scales through by using his napkin to clean her new loafers. The next day, on Naoto's way to school, he sees his little nemesis walking ahead of him and thinks of ways to greet her, but he gives up since he thinks it'll be creepy. So the loser tries to hide from her, but she appears in front of him with a devilish smirk, and he had no choice but to spill the beans, and upon doing so, she decides to show him ways to approach friends when they meet, and in the process, the lackey bumps his foot on the floor and grabs her from the back. He then tries to correct himself, but he bumps into her friends and they greet him casually. During club activities, Naoto sketches a painting while Nagatoro stays with him and complains of the cold in the art room, so she brings out her stockings and asks her senpai to wear them for her. The dolt steps up to do as he is told, and in the process, he ends up touching her thighs, so she makes fun of him till they go on their outing after school. At the sushi restaurant, the girls decide to treat their senpai to a meal, but he is used as a slave to serve them food. After a while, they decide to treat him specially by combining different flavors of their foods and offering them to him. He tries it out and loves it, but it upsets his little demon, and she decides to act jealous and offer him a nasty combination, which later turns out well. Nagatoro also assists him in getting his food, and he starts to think of her as a nice person. Another day at the club, Nagatoro visits him and has some snacks. This makes the poor senpai request for a bit, but she tells him to close his eyes and open his mouth, and he does as he is told, but she tricks him and fires something down his throat. Another day for Hachioji at the art club, but he is having trouble drawing, so his beloved senpai, the student club president, enters his room and gives him tickets to go to the zoo and sketch the animals while believing it'll ignite his passion for art. He asks her why she gave him 2 tickets, and she says he should invite his ebony mistress along, unknowing to him that Nagatoro had been eavesdropping. After a while, the club president leaves and Nagatoro enters the art room looking all chummy while wanting to be asked on a date by her senpai. But it takes the prayers of everyone wanting to ship the two of them together to work and give the loser the courage to invite her to the zoo. On a particularly planned weekend, the two of them meet at a zoo and Naoto hands Miss Ebony her sketchbook, and it makes her realize that they aren't on a date but to draw the animals. She then gets jealous when she sees him paying more attention to the animals instead of her, but she takes it in like a man and decides to let him have fun in his way. She then decides to join him and tries sketching, but she fails miserably at it, so she asks her beloved senpai to hold her hands and perform some light strokes, but this makes the loser tremble since he reeks of beta energy. He then sums up all the courage points in his life to get himself to hold a girl and assist her, and of course, Miss Nagatoro wouldn't miss a chance in her life to tease him. After a lot of trial and error, the two of them decide to take a break at a restaurant, but as most slice-of-life anime would have it, one of Naoto's juniors enters with his date and sees the 2 sketchbooks, so he praises one while he makes fun of the other, and this triggers the loser senpai into standing up for his beloved kuhai. But the junior tries making fun of him, and then the usual plot happens and Nagatoro comes in and saves the day, scaring the junior away. She feels happy seeing her senpai stand up for her, so she asks that they draw one more animal. The two of them then go out to sketch a sloth, but she stands far away and sketches her senpai while he draws the sloth. When they finish with their works, they show each other their art, and it makes him realize how careful she was in sketching him, so he starts having romantic thoughts. But he kills it when she starts teasing him and calling him a pervert for staring at his image for so long. At the art club, Nagatoro teases her senpai for a while before heading out to have some girl talk with her friend, but unfortunately for her, she leaves her phone behind and Naoto sees it, so he takes it along with him and heads towards her class. On his way to the lower class, he realizes that he doesn't know her first name or her class, but a junior helps him out and points the loser to her class on getting there. He sees that she isn't in class, so he worries, and when he sees her friend, he hides inside the class closet, but she later enters and meets up with her friends. The girls chat in the class for some time, and they later talk about the guys they like when it reaches Nagatoro's turn. She says something plain like loving the type of guy she hangs out with, but as the plot will have it, she checks for her phone and realizes that she left it behind, so the girls volunteer to tag along and see the guy she hangs out with, but the fool makes noise in the closet and it gets their attention. Nagatoro then offers to check it out, and as soon as she opens it, she sees her loser senpai, who stretches out her phone and hands it over to her. She then helps him out and questions him if he heard all that they were saying, but the loser quickly denies it and bails, thereby shocking her. At night, after that day, Neato practices on his stamina for the marathon race coming up the following day, but he sprains his ankle in the process. The following day arrives and his ankle feels all better, so he joins in on the marathon race on the way. He sees Nagatoro, who praises him for being better, but as she and her friends discuss, they see the club president dressed in a bunny girl outfit sprint ahead of them, so they challenge her to a race and use Neato as their ace. But unfortunately for them, he sprains his ankle and he has his kind Kuhai help him out. They all put in their maximum effort, and with the power of friendship, they catch up with Madam Milkers and nearly win the marathon, but they get disqualified for doing it as a team. Days later, Neato notices that Nagatoro hasn't been coming to the club, so he meets her friends to ask what is going on. The socially awkward fella struggles to express himself, but they notice his plight and tell him about how his beloved Kuhai is sick and she is bedridden, so they hand him notes to deliver it to her since he knows her house. After he gets to her house, he rings the doorbell for a while, but being a worrywart, he trespasses and tries checking up on her. He gets caught by her elder sister, who almost calls the cops on him had it not confessed to whom he was, and he fesses up on being her little sister's senpai who came to return her homework. She then lets her guard down and brings him into the house while informing him that her little sister is asleep. She notices his interest in her little sister's picture, so she teases him to get some information out of him and to tell him some of her annoying brat secrets. Nagatoro later steps out to meet her sister, but freaks out when she sees her beloved senpai in her sitting room, so she runs round the house and dresses herself. Her elder sister tries to calm her with pudding and it works, but she almost spills embarrassing secrets about her, so Nagatoro takes her senpai to the room to enjoy their pudding. Immediately after, she spoon feeds him her pudding, but her elder sister, who is a spoiled sport, interrupts their lovey-dovey time and tells Neato that she'll tell him more about her younger sister later. This ruins the mood, but Nagatoro doesn't relent, so she challenges her senpai to an arcade game and the two of them battle it out. As they play, she teases him and makes a bet on telling him one of her secrets if he wins. This fires the poor boy, and the two of them battle it out, but she loses in the long run. At first he wants to know her first name, but he gave up and tried playing Mr. Righteous, so they both agree that she'll tell him her first name in the long run, but as usual, her elder sister drops in and calls her by her first name, but she also brings baby albums of her sister. After a while, he drops her assignments and heads home, so she sees him off and thanks him for visiting. The loser smiles to himself and mutters her first name on his way home. Another time at the club, Nagatoro comes over to tease her senpai, so she strikes a Bruce Lee pose and he draws her that way, but due to it taking a while, she starts having muscle cramps and collapses on the floor, causing her senpai to jump in and save the day. On their way to school the following morning, Nagatoro casually greets her senpai, but he has trouble replying to her since he knows her first name. Seeing this, the cute Ebony reaches for his sleeve and looks up at him innocently, raising his heart the poor senior, but the naughty junior teases him and tries it over and over, and they end up holding hands and get walked on by her friends, leading to a big understanding. The next day, the loser of a senior later ends up catching a cold, and he likely got it from his beloved junior. His mom notices his bad health and tries canceling her trip, but he tells her that he's a Chad and he can take care of himself, leading her to get on with her journey. The brat skips school to take the day off to cool his body, but doing that makes his junior worry about him after not seeing her beloved senpai, so she reaches out to him and he briefs her of his health. His health later gets worse, but Nagatoro comes over to his place and ends up trespassing like he did, and with a guilty conscience, he lets her in while being happy that she was worried about him. She then takes him upstairs to his room and gets a feel of his place. In his room, she tries looking for his magazine stash, but stops as soon as she realizes how serious his health condition is becoming, hence she checks his body temperature by placing her forehead on his in the sasuk, and attaches style, and she finds some towel and uses it to cool his rising temperature. After a while, the brat confesses to being hungry, so Nagatoro gets up to prepare a meal for him. The heat later gets to his head and he starts daydreaming to the point that he sees her as his wife, feeding him, unaware that the events in his dream are happening in front of him simultaneously, so he calls her Hayes, her first name out of character, and it makes her blush. After feeding him for a while, the brat sleeps off and nearly gets his first kiss stolen, but his mom ruins the moment by arriving just in time. The following morning, he heads downstairs and his mom comments on his fever going down. He then tells her that it wasn't as serious as she thought it was, which makes her ask about the cute girl she saw the night before. Hachioji then responds to his mother stiffly, saying Nagatoro isn't his girlfriend but a junior of his. He later heads to class and recalls the moments that happened the day before, but he comes across Nagatoro who acts shy in front of him. She then clears the awkward air by kicking him severely and saying that's what he gets for working her to the bone. As they argue, he grabs her by the leg and they get walked on by her friends. So she smacks him down and claims it to be a form of judo practice, but none of the hottas believe her. It is almost Christmas Eve and Nagatoro struggles while thinking about the gift she should give her loser senpai, so she asks her elder sister. The elder sister tries to pry but Hayes prevents her and manages to get a bit of good advice from her. On the day of Christmas Eve, Naoto dreams of the ideal way to hand Hayes her present, but he wakes up to reality and goes to school. In school, he has his beloved junior disturbing him for what he plans to do on Christmas Eve, but the loner gets fed up and almost hands her the present, but he gets interrupted by her friends, so they all have a round table discussion about what they plan on doing after class. After a lot of consideration, the girls settle on karaoke, but during their conversation, the loser peeks at Hayes' bag and sees a present inside, so he comes up with an excuse of having to pick something he forgot at the art clubroom, and she uses it as a leverage to escape with him. On getting to the room, they try setting the mood right and exchanging presents, but the club president interrupts them, showing her plots and cake in whole glory, making them escape and find a decent spot to use. On their way, they see a strict teacher walking about the hallway while trying to maintain law and order, so they run to the rooftop and they are met with lots of students engaging in romantic activities. Naoto just switches his mood to damn this shit and hands Hayes the present he had for her. The two of them exchange presents and it makes them realize that they got the same type of presents for each other. Days pass and it's New Year's Eve. Nagatoro messages her senpai, asking if he'll be visiting the nearby shrine during the new year. After lots of mental bullying, he mans the fuck up and asks her to follow him. Early in the morning, he goes to the shrine but sees her in a Miko outfit and comments on how cute she is. She then takes him around and shows him the process of making offerings in the shrine, but along the line, his cute junior gets busy, so she has to do her part-time work, leaving the sore loser alone. Naoto then goes through his New Year fortune and sees that he has to be active if he ever plans on getting a girlfriend. So the boy walks up to his junior who is still at work with the plan of asking her out like a Chad, but he whimpers away and ends up talking to her like a stalker. He then decides to wait for her not far away and she meets up with him sometime later and they explore the matchmaking temple. Nagatoro planned on getting info out of him, but he blurts out some Giga Chad lines that'll make a courier fall for him, so they have fun at the temple. After offering their prayers, she asks him what he prayed for, but he ends up saying mundane things while she teases him of praying to become his future wife. Naoto gets himself some contact lenses but doesn't know how to put them on, but his one and only ebony troublemaker shows up and offers to help him out. At first, he worries that she'd damage his eyeballs, but the loser is reassured that she can help him, so she bosses him around and puts them on for him. After putting them on, he realizes how cute she is up close but flusters like a loser and tries adjusting an imaginary pair of glasses on his nose. The school later has a field trip to a ski resort, leading the children into practicing it. Useless Naoto and his friends struggle at the beginner's course, but they watch his beloved Kuhai and her friends ski like professionals in the ultimate course. Nagatoro sees her loser senpai and offers to teach him, shocking his friends that he is familiar with one of the most popular girls in their school. The bum accepts her offer meekly and they both take the beginner's course. As she teaches him, she makes fun of him for wallpapering the nearest snow wall with his face. The loser starts to feel moody because his initial idea of being able to ski with her will go to waste, and his sad mood intensifies when he watches her friends have fun without her. His low self-esteem kicks in and he becomes a worrywart who feels like she is better off without him. Time passes and the girls go ahead to ski during the night. On their way, Nagatoro sees her loser senpai and offers to teach him, but he backs down while complaining that the twigs he has for legs are hurting, so she leaves him. The loser even has his friends and Hayes' friends question his decision, to the point that he later changes his mind to practice by himself. As he practices, he sticks to the rules she taught him earlier, even though he ends up falling. His sheer will and determination help him save a child from colliding with a tree. Without a moment of rest, some bozos ski towards him and almost collide with him, but his cute kohai rescues him and hurls death threats at the retards. She then comments on his good efforts and he uses the opportunity to ask her shyly to teach him how to ski. They practice through the night and Neato gets better at it to the point that Hayes brags about him in front of her friends the following day, and it makes his friends ask him to teach them. The loser then puts on a serious look and tries showing them how it's done, but ends up face painting his body into the snow walls. Later in school, the club president visits Neato and congratulates her on being accepted into an art university, but she uses the period to encourage him while passing the banner as the head of the arts club to him. So she asks him what he'll want to do as soon as he is done with school, and the loser dreams big of wanting to get into her university. Nagatoro assists her senpai in going through the lists of canvases kept in the art club. She suggests that he sell off some of them to create space. She then sees one of the student president's explicit art and asks if they can toss it into the bin. Another time in the clubroom, useless Neato runs out of ideas to draw, so he sees his cute kuhai gently whiling away her time, but she catches him gazing and decides to use it against him. The poor boy had no choice but to ask her to pose for him since he needed to draw some portraits. The naughty Ebony strikes multiple poses, but he sees her make a judo stance and decides to go with it. After sketching her, she goes over to see her beautiful portrait, but rather than praising him, she decides to make fun of him by saying he is ogling at her picture. During judo lessons, the wimp gets folded like a mat at the start of his judo practice, which has him feeling bad, and he wishes his kuhai never gets to find out about how useless he is, but she watches and insults him through the window. The instructor hands them a flyer shortly after, and as the loser tries to show Hayes, he sees that she has gone with the wind. Later, during his art practice, her friends come to the room and show him a flyer of the judo tournament going around, making them realize that she isn't in the room, so they ask him for her whereabouts. Neato later heads to Gamu's place and he sees Nagatoro practicing with her. He stares intently at them and catches her attention, causing her to lose focus and be struck down with a blow. He later enters and apologizes to her, but the bitch wouldn't hear a word, so she kept on ranting. She finally calms down when he tells her that the reason he is around is because he wants her to teach him a little judo so that he can perform fairly better than he did in the last tournament. She agrees and shows him the basics before trying to spar with him, hereby knocking the fool off his feet. She tells him to try and escape her grip, but the lad struggles for his life before saying she's the heaviest person who has ever grappled him. As she fights her friend, she cleanly grapples her before slamming her down. After the match, they walk home together and he tells her how amazing her throw is. It makes her blush, so she bails to hide her embarrassment. In school, the club president shows up to train Neato in judo, but in the process her milkers get in his way, and it almost suffocates him. Nagatoro then shows up looking all paranoid, but Neato speaks on her behalf to the club president that she is already teaching him. The night before the tourney, Neato prepares for the tourney by doing some warm-up exercises, and in the process, he remembers the training Nagatoro put him through and hopes he doesn't let her down, but in Nagatoro's place, she goes through the tourney's list and sees a name Orihara and feels somewhat troubled. The day of the tournament arrives and Nagatoro is the only one among her friends that manages to beat her opponent but proceed to the first round. The tournament is grouped into two places, with the females and the males being separated and put in different teams. Gamu faces Orihara, but she gets her ass handed to her by the soon-to-be Japanese national judo wrestler. Nagatoro sees that she'll be going against her and decides to go out to get some air. Her loser senpai walks up to her, but she tells him her backstory that he didn't ask for, and the dude acts like a Chad by letting everything go through his ears and coming out of the other one, so he encourages her and it makes her angry at first. But when she sees his undaunted will, she changes the subject and makes a bet with him that if he wins his first round, she'll blow him a kiss. The virgin boy gets so excited and plans to give it his all against an opponent. On getting to the ring, he sees his opponent has a lot of muscles and knows that he is in a big dilemma as soon as the ref announces the start of their match. The opponent throws him and smacks his entire career on the judo mat, but being too rough, he ends up getting half the usual points, so he builds more points by repeating the process, and it's surprising that Glasses didn't pass out. The built boy goes to grapple him next, and at the end of the day Nagatoro cheers for her loser senpai, giving him the morale to break through the grapple and reverse the process. The boy tries his best to pin the built Chad, but the match ends and Chad earns the win due to the stockpiled points he initially had. Neato then heads to where his friends are and they congratulate him for faring well against such a tough opponent. Roughly after, Nagatoro's turn arrives to fight Orihara. The two of them start as soon as the ref signals, and it makes everyone watching realize how high class the match is. But along the line, Nagatoro gets grappled and thrown to the ground, but she halves the point by twisting in the air, preventing her back from touching the mat. Upon seeing what happened, the people start cheering for Orihara to perform better, but Naoto can't stand his little junior being humiliated, so he cheers her on without worrying about the side comments being said about him, and in doing so Nagatoro grabs her and hurls her to the ground. Later that day, after the match, Nagatoro and her senpai walk home. She recalls losing to Orihara due to being disqualified by throwing her out of the ring. They sulk a little for not being able to win over their opponents, but the cheers her senpai did for her earlier motivate her into wanting to face Orihara again, and next time, she plans to whoop her ass, so she asks her loser senpai to kiss her if she beats Orihara, but the idiot thinks she is merely teasing her, so he tries brushing it off, but she reassures him that she is serious, and then she runs off. Naoto sits perplexed in the art room and thinks of what to draw, but Hayase walks in on him and reminds him that he has become a third-year student, so he should behave properly. While they converse, she questions him to find out what he wants, so the brat guesses what's on his mind by requesting to model for him. And as usual, the simp doesn't lose the opportunity, so he asks her to pose for him. The maiden in love jumps into the changing room and puts on her swimsuit, surprising the artist himself, so the two of them dilly-dally themselves in arguments before getting to work. After about 10 minutes into sketching her, they take a break. As soon as he finishes, she tells him that she plans to join the judo club with her goal of beating Orihara and getting a kiss from him as a reward, causing the dolt to freak out and talk about it like it's a joke. She then gets annoyed with him and asks him dead in the eye if he doesn't want to kiss her. As they argue back and forth, a new face shows up in the art room, announcing herself as a new member, and speaks to Naoto, whom she knew before since they both went to the same middle school. She then talks about how he taught her well, arousing the spirit of jealousy in Nagatoro. Naoto finally does the right thing by introducing Nagatoro to the girl, who is their previous club president's cousin. After the introductions, she sees the relationship between Naoto and her and decides to ask if they are dating, triggering a dangerous scenario, but as Nagatoro tries to handle the situation well, Naoto ruins it by backing out like a sissy, causing Nagatoro to be annoyed with him. She then tells her kuhai that she isn't a member of the art club but has come to model for him. Gamu later enters to meet Nagatoro and hand over her judo uniform, but she sees the new girl and assumes her to be Naoto's new chick, almost complicating the whole matter. She later heads out with Nagatoro, leaving Naoto and the new member alone. This causes a lot of unease, and during judo practice, Nagatoro gets her ass handed to her on several occasions that Gamu notices that she had been absent-minded, so she concludes it's about her senpai, so she teases Nagatoro about it while telling Orihara about her friend's mental state. The two of them ask her what she plans to do since she won't have enough time to focus on her senpai due to her judo practice, but the adamant witch says she'll practice harder at judo so she'll be able to tease her senpai the more. On the other hand, Sunamiya speaks with Naoto about Nagatoro and assumes that they like each other. She then goes through a list of her portraits and realizes how colorful he is when it comes to Nagatoro, so she concludes that he likes her. The wussy tries denying his feelings, but she sees through him and asks him to take Nagatoro on a date. A lot of outing activities flash through the loser's mind, and he doesn't consider the option of going out with Nagatoro since they aren't dating, so he tells Sunamiya about how Nagatoro would react if he told her, but she says she doesn't have much experience since she hasn't known love. After school hours, they walk out of the building and the loser asks her if she'll have to call home, but she tells him not to worry and a bike appears right in front of them. He studies the rider and sees that it's the former club president. The two of them then speak for a while, but her cousin walks up to her and briefs her concerning his problem, and upon hearing it, she encourages him to follow his heart before driving off with her little cousin's sister. Naoto, who is now free from the two of them, looks over to the judo club and sees that the members are still practicing, so he decides to wait for his kuhai like a stalker, and not long after, she bursts through the doors like some Doraemon cartoon and sees her senpai waiting for her. Then the two of them talk and walk home together. On their way, the contact-wearing loser thinks of how to ask Nagatoro out on a date, so the first thing he tries is to suss her out for clues, but she ends up saying a lot of unrealistic places that high schoolers can go. After a while of thorough brainless thinking, they come to zero conclusions and decide to part ways. On his way home, he sees a penguin poster and it reminds him of a place she'd love to visit, so he concludes on them going to the aquarium. As late as it is, virgin boy Naoto stiffly runs to her and tries asking her to go to the aquarium with him, but he fails like the loser he is, so she tries getting him to say it again, and this time around, the loser summons courage out of nowhere and asks her out properly on a date. After doing the needful, he expects her to show a disgusting reaction, but he gets shocked by her when she puts up her most beautiful smile and agrees to the proposed date. The following day, Naoto seems to be spaced out in the clubroom and it ends up worrying Sanemiya, who then asks him what seems wrong. The fool for her senior tries brushing things off, but the little brain cells left in his head do the math, and he ends up telling her about his planned date, but the reaction he gets from Sanemiya seems to be pretty intense. He then appreciates her for helping him out. Later that night, Four Eyes struggles to find the clothes to put on for his date coming up the following day. And the same thing happens to Nagatoro, who gets pestered by her elder sister to try something more mature. The day of their date shows up and we have the loser all kitted up like he is in a fashion contest. He then waits for his date to show up while checking himself out if he doesn't reek of loser energy. She later shows up in a good-looking outfit and walks to meet her senpai while teasing him, but they end up being stalked by her friends and his club member. The two of them hit the train and head towards the aquarium. On the way, Nagatoro scores her beloved senpai, but she gets so brutal with it and hands a lot of negative points to him for his outfit and his demeanor. But they do not know that they are being followed by her friends who plan of making sure Naoto keeps his V card forever. But outside the train, they get trailed by Sadina and her cousin sister who plan to protect Naoto's love no matter what happens. On getting to the aquarium, the couple gets mixed up among the crowd and the stalkers lose their targets. The little witch switches from strict mode to couple mode and enjoys having fun with her senpai, and it makes the boy more confused about them going out for real or a practice date. As they enjoy themselves, she sees other couples holding hands and wants the same for herself, so she tries testing her senpai to see if he knows what to do, and in the process, he loses more points. He tries his best to recover the points, so he looks around to find out if something is missing in the process. He sees the stalkers and gets worried about their dates being squandered, so he grabs his date by the hands and runs away with her. This makes the naughty girl happy that he managed to do what was on her mind. The stalkers see them running away and try chasing after her, but Sanemiya interrupts them and tries to prevent them from moving ahead. The two of them then plan on dealing with her, but her older cousin appears and scares the living crap out of them, so they retreat with their tails between their legs. After managing to lose the stalkers, they go to have ice cream and the two of them get different flavors as usual. Nagatoro tries to feed her senpai her own, but he backs down like a wussy, and as they struggle, the creams touch each other and they end up having to take the two flavors that way. They later sit in the front row in a dolphin diving show, and it makes Naoto think about how cute Nagatoro is. The loser sizes her up but then looks down on himself, so he feels that he isn't a right match for her, but as the plot would do its wonders, a dolphin splashes water at her and he jumps in between and uses his body to shield her from it, acting like Captain America. She realizes what happened a few seconds later and teases him for acting very cool, so she dries up his hair, and they enjoy their day till they finish sightseeing. After they leave the aquarium, the two of them walk on the beach side while talking about how much fun they had, but she changes the subject and sums up the total amount of points he has. After a lot of pluses and minuses, he ends up getting a sum of 50 points out of 1,000. Her friends later see them and try to ruin their date, but one of them stops the other and asks that they do not become cockblockers while this is happening. Naoto and Nagatoro plan on practicing how to hug, but in the process, they get interrupted by the two groups and this makes them embarrassed, so Nagatoro ends up switching to a judo stance with her date. During school, Nagatoro hangs out with one of her friends while beefing with the other two, but her other friend begs on the other's behalf and she ends up forgiving them, so they decide to rendezvous at her loser senpai's club room. As they get there, they meet Sanemiya feeding her senpai and it gets Nagatoro riled up, but Sanemiya confesses to doing this as her punishment for interrupting his date. The bitch later suggests cooking more till the end of the week, and this triggers Nagatoro into wanting to cook for senpai the following day, but he refuses her request while saying that she has judo lessons the following morning, so he wouldn't like to stress her. Everybody around looks at the idiot with disappointment after realizing a good opportunity he turned down, but he surprises them by deciding to cook for her the following day while she cooks for him the day after. This makes Nagatoro happy and she agrees immediately on the spot. After school, Nagatoro and Neato walk home together, and on getting to where they part ways, he reminds her that he'll be cooking for her and she reminds him to continue from where they stopped, so the two teenagers put down their bags and hug themselves awkwardly. After savoring her senpai's hug, she tells him that he feels very warm.